Hey everybody, welcome back to the Strength and Weakness podcast with Guy and Davion. Davion, what I thought we could talk about today is, somewhat of a topic that I would think that most people in culture and in our world today would say is really almost impossible. You and I, of course, both as Christian men, have devoted our lives and our futures to following a set of boundaries and guardrails that we believe the Bible has put in place, put there by God to help us to live righteous and godly lives. And of course, we're both same gender attracted, but we're of the belief that homosexuality is not compatible with the Christian faith. And so if you want to follow Jesus, participating in, celebrating and embracing a gay life is not a part of the Christian faith. And so you and I, as Christian men, even though we have attractions to the same gender, have dedicated and devoted ourselves to saying, yeah, you know what, that may be my reality, but I refuse to live that way. I'm going to follow another path, which would mean that if Davion and Guy want to be in a intimate relationship with another human being, if we're going to follow what we believe is God's plan, then that would necessarily mean it has to be with somebody of the opposite sex. So that brings about some unique, nuances that a lot of people wouldn't have to face that you and I do have to face because we're same-sex attracted, and yet here we are devoting ourselves to being in a relationship with somebody of the opposite sex. So I thought maybe we could talk about that for our next couple of podcasts, actually, about, what life was like as single. How did we find a female to date and build a relationship with and then get married? And now here we are. I got kids, you've got kids. So we've both been through the gambit there. So let's get into that. Let's start with you, Davion. I mean, again, you're a lot younger than I am, but I don't know, when you were, in your teens or whatever, or getting into your early 20s, did you ever imagine marrying a woman considering the fact that you have same gender attractions?
Yeah, I did. It was always a dream of mine to have a family. I always wanted a wife, always wanted kids. It was something that I would quite literally daydream about. Just what would it be like to be a husband and a dad? And I think I dreamt of it more because of my struggle with same-sex attraction. I thought, man, it'd be really cool to have this, but I don't know if I ever will get to have it. And, I think being a teenager where I grew up, it wasn't something that I could openly discuss. I felt unsafe to discuss my attractions with anybody. And the environment that I lived in treated people who were like me very hostilely. And so it's just kind of stuff that I just kept to myself, but I definitely dreamed of it. I didn't know if it would come to pass. That's a different story, but I thought, man, it'd be cool to be able to have a wife and kids one day. So yeah, I don't know. What about you? What was it like for you when you were a teenager?
So this is interesting. Like, let me ask you this before I answer that. In the ministry that we run, which of course where we help same gender attracted Christians from various different churches all around the world, our experiences has been that not everybody is completely 100% same-sex attracted.
Yeah,
That they're maybe on a scale.
sure.
There are some who are 100% attracted to the same gender. They've never been attracted to the opposite sex physically ever in their life. I would put myself on that scale. I would say, I'm 10 out of 10 attracted to the same gender. But then we have people in our ministry that are like, more like a 6 or 7 out of 10. I do have some attraction to the opposite sex. Where are you on that scale? Because that helps us understand in the context of this conversation about you desiring a wife and getting married someday.
Sure. Yeah. That's tough. I don't know that I would permanently mark myself on the
You want
scale.
to put a number on it?
Yeah, it's kind of tough. I would say, I'd go with the safe answer and say 5. I think,
Oh, you're
I find
5.
myself, well, I would say it moves from time to time. So I'd say
Okay.
there are times where
Yeah.
I don't even think about it. I don't even notice it, and I'm a 1. And, it's just not even something that crosses my mind.
Sure.
But then there are times where I'd say I'm like an 8 or 9, where I
Yeah.
feel like,
I
okay,
get that.
temptation is strong, and I definitely notice these attractions a lot more. But if we were to say consistently, I'd say somewhere about 5 or 6 maybe, where I definitely have attraction for the opposite sex and for the same sex.
So, okay,
Yeah.
so that's really interesting. So you're kind of like, 5 or 6, overall, that's kind of where you're at. Whereas I would say, no, I'm completely 10, same gender attracted, have been since my youth. That's all I've ever known or experienced.
Mhm.
So when I was, single, certainly in my teens and into my early 20s, and during my early 20s, lived a very promiscuous gay life, crossed a lot of dangerous lines, and it was not a safe life. And, back then, I think, no, I couldn't imagine marrying a woman. I didn't know how that would be possible. I'd never had a girlfriend before, never kissed a girl before. I was like, I don't know, what would I even, when I was
Yeah.
becoming a Christian, it was like, man, that's one of the costs actually that I had to count
Mm.
in order for me to give my life to Jesus, was that I recognized because homosexuality is not what God intended for human sexuality, that God's plan for human sexuality is that it be reserved between that of a man and a woman bound together only in marriage, and that it be something that lasts a lifetime. I thought to myself, well, I can't imagine ever marrying a woman. I'm not even attracted to women. So for me, uh, becoming a Christian meant, oh, I guess I'm giving up this idea that I would ever be able to share all that life has to offer with another human being.
Mhm.
I'll live my Christian life alone and celibate. And because I just couldn't comprehend the idea that it would be possible for me to be with a woman, A, because I wasn't attracted to women, but I also couldn't imagine a woman, a sister in the church, wanting to be married
Mhm.
to somebody like me who would bring this challenge to the relationship. Thought, what woman would be willing to live with that? So I think, my thought at the time was, I don't want to be alone. Like loneliness, there's a difference between being alone or being lonely. I think um, I don't do really well alone, and I get lonely quickly. And I thought, gee whiz, if I have to live my life alone, I will be lonely. I don't want that,
Mhm.
but I can't imagine ever marrying a woman either. So I guess my cost account will be that I am going to, yeah, stay single for the rest of my Christian life. I just couldn't imagine. Now, that was a big cost account. I kind of thought to myself, well, you know what? If Jesus can die for me, then, you know, I can do this. Not my
Yeah.
first choice in life, but I'm willing to. In order
Yeah.
for me to get my sins forgiven, live a Christian life, I had, my life by then was a train wreck. And I thought, I've followed my own path for so many years and I've just made a mess of things. It's time for me to make a change here. I'm going to start following God's plan and resist to follow my own. And I thought, well, if God's plan is that I be in a relationship with a woman, then I guess I'm gonna or be celibate. I'm gonna have to choose celibacy. Possible.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I also felt in terms of possibility, you said that you weren't sure if any woman would ever want to be married to you if
Mhm.
knowing that you have those struggles. And I felt that myself. I thought, is am I ever going to meet someone that is just going to be okay with the fact that I struggle with this, and are they going to be secure in my love for them or my attraction to them, or that I genuinely desire to be in a relationship with them? Or would it be a situation where she's constantly wondering, like, does he actually love me? Does he actually want to be with me? And so I thought, man, that if I were in that situation, I could totally understand why, someone would not want to be in a relationship with someone who's attracted to the opposite sex. And so I definitely I share that sentiment of in terms of, is this possible? And I think too the loneliness part of it, I think wrestling with it, with the reality that, man, I might have to be alone. And I remember when I was in college, my two best friends, we all had a group of friends. There were 5 of us, and I was the constant fifth wheel. And so my two friends had girlfriends and I was single, but we all did almost everything together. And I was the best man in both of their weddings and got to see them get married. And, I just remember feeling like, gosh, I felt that sense of aloneness because I'm like, they're going to go home with their wives and I'm going to go home to my
Me.
roommate. And it's kind of lame. And so now every time we hang out, it's going to be different because,
Yeah.
they're married now. And so I was like, oh man, I want that. Like that's something I desire. And so, but it's curious to see the, what's the word, juxtaposition, I guess, of our experiences where, you were of the camp of, I don't know if this is going to be possible. I'm not really looking forward to it. And, on my end, it seems like there's a sense of longing, a desperation, if you will, to experience this part of life,
Yeah.
of being in a relationship. But it was really difficult, I think, navigating, and I think I felt a lot of frustration with God because I felt like, God, I really want this. I really desire this, but I have this baggage that I feel like is keeping me from experiencing
Mm.
something that I really desire. And so I had to wrestle and pray and get my heart right. And I think for different reasons, I had to get to a place of, okay, I'm content with just being single for the rest of my life and just being in it for Jesus. And if this dream of mine never comes true, does that mean I'm going to forfeit my walk with Jesus? No. I mean, Jesus is worth giving everything up for, every dream, every desire, every sin, he's worth giving it all up for. And I really had to fight to get to that place. So it was a lot, but I'm grateful that I kind of worked through that stuff. So
Yeah, and I think it's important to say too that, I mean, we certainly experience this in our ministry and the numbers of people that come to our organization for assistance and help. But a lot of people aren't interested in getting married, don't want to, are completely fine with it. They feel like they are their best selves when they're alone. And so, I just think it's important for us to stress that this is more of a personal, individual decision, and your value and worth to God and your value and worth to the church and your value and worth as a human being isn't based on whether you're married or whether you're single. I think,
right.
unfortunately, over the years, for whatever reason, churches especially have put a premium on somebody's value somehow, as if you're married, you're in a better position in life. And, that, of course, is a ridiculous notion. And so, and very unfortunate. So there's going to be people watching or listening to this podcast who are like, I'm fine being single. I never imagined that I would ever get married and I don't want to. Good for you. Well, congratulations. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But then there's going to be others who are like, I really do. I wish I could, but how is that going to be possible? So I would like to think maybe that your story and my story would give a little bit of hope to people who are hoping and praying for this possibility in their life. Of course, we don't have a crystal ball of
Right.
what God will do in people's lives, but certainly, I would like to think that being attracted to the same gender from one degree to another, whether you're a 5 or whether you're a 10, is no limitation to being able to, at least from God's perspective, being able to be in a loving, kind, fulfilling, intimate relationship with somebody of the opposite sex, and that where you couldn't just have an amazing marriage,
Right.
and that I think would rival heterosexual marriages where both people are completely heterosexually attracted. So, don't let this be a defining thing for you where it's like, oh, not possible for me. It is possible. There's so many other people who belong to our ministry who got married and are living fantastic and amazing lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's important too to note that, like reiterating that your relationship with God, your relationship with Jesus is the most important relationship ever. And regardless of where you end up, I think that's where we have to find our value and we have to find our fulfillment at the end of the day.
So yeah, for somebody who's in the spot I was in and wondering how best to move forward, I mean, I remember those years really well. And as I'd mentioned, it's one thing to be lonely. That's another thing to be alone. I really did start feeling lonely, and it was feeling so disappointed that while I was willing to, the idea that I would be single for the rest of my life and I wouldn't have anybody to be able to share life with seemed really daunting, especially considering that I was just in my, mid to late 20s. And if I lived the average lifespan of a Canadian male, which I would have like another, 50 years to live, I thought, man, to do this alone, I mean, Jesus is worth it and all. Don't get me wrong, but wow, this is not what I want for life. So that seemed really overwhelming to me. And so I just really prayed about it. I did pray that God would bring me somebody. I didn't know what that would look like or how that would come about, but I did make it a matter of prayer. And then I just lived my life. The other thing was I just didn't want it to consume and control my life. I recognized that there was other parts of my life that I could be very happy and successful in, and I was going to, really uh, celebrate those things. And I didn't want the fact that I was single and probably would be for the rest of my life to be so consuming to me that it would envelop who I am. And, where I'm, discouraged and bummed out all the time because I don't have another person to share life with. I didn't want that. So I thought, I'm going to be a great employee. At the time, I was a construction worker and I enjoyed my job. I was making good money. I had a lot of good friends. I was heavily involved in the church. So I just really leaned in on those things. And then in my private life, really prayed that God would bring me somebody. And of course, he did. But, I think my advice would be, number one, your value and worth to God isn't based on this. You can live an amazing Christian life even if you don't find somebody. But if that is a priority of yours, what I would do is I would really pray about it and then keep your eyes open. Look for opportunities to build relationships with people and see what God does with that. So, that's exactly what I did. I really leaned in on prayer and just doing the best I could to be a faithful, godly Christian man. And sure enough, over a period of time, I met Kathy, who just became a best friend. So God answered that prayer for me, and it worked out in an amazing way.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing all that, sharing your story, and I think it's really inspiring that regardless of what your attraction is, that it doesn't have to define how things play out in your life, or that it doesn't limit what God is able to do in your life, and that it is possible for things to work out in ways that we maybe don't expect. And so that's certainly the case for myself as well. I thought, okay, I struggle with this, so this is probably going to mean that I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. And I had, in my mind, kind of decided my future, but obviously God had other plans for myself, for you as well. And so, I appreciate you sharing all that.
Yeah, what I love about these stories, Davion, is that God is the God of the impossible. And while everybody else in culture and society today would say that what you and I have experienced is almost impossible, we're living proof that that's not the God that we follow. So anyway, I value and appreciate your story too. And hopefully what we're sharing will be a benefit to everybody. And I guess in our next podcast, what we're going to do is let's talk a little bit about how did we reveal this information to our significant other? What did that look like? What are some boundaries and guardrails we can use to help us as we do that? And what do you do if you're in a situation in life where you're like, man, I've been married for a while now and my wife still doesn't know, or my husband still doesn't know? What do you do there? I think there's a lot of good things we can add to the conversation to help people out.
Sounds good.
So anyway, that was my experience, Davion. I don't know. What about you? Was it love at first sight? How did you choose this lovely woman that you ended up marrying? Like, what did that look like at the beginning?
Yeah, it was kind of love at first sight for me. I saw her and I thought, man, she's great. Um, maybe not first sight, maybe second or third
Second
sight.
sight, okay.
But yeah, when we met, I'd actually been interviewing for the ministry position that I'm in now, here in Missouri, and she was already here working. And so, when I first met her, it was very brief. She was on staff and I talked to her for about 2 minutes. But when I'd actually moved here, I feel like I'd noticed her for the first time and immediately felt attracted to her. I thought she was beautiful. I thought she was just an awesome sister in the church. And, um, I liked her pretty quickly. And I thought to myself, well, I have this struggle that, I have that I've been wrestling with for a while. And um, I felt that she needed to know about it if anything was going to happen. And so, with my mentor and her mentor, the four of us, we sat down and I just told her, I was like, hey, I don't know if you've noticed at all, which she totally noticed, but I am really interested in you and I really like you. And, but I have this struggle and I just feel like I want to get it out there in the open because I do want to, for all intents and purposes, I was like, I want to date you and I feel like you should know this. And so anyway, I shared that with her. It was very
Oh, great
vulnerable.
man.
Yeah, I know it was nerve-wracking.
I'll bet.
But it was a very vulnerable place to be, probably the most vulnerable I've ever been in my life. Because I'd never put myself out there in this way for anybody before. And she took some time to process it and think about it, which is fair to her. I was like, I have to be okay with the fact that she may say, you know what? Sorry, I don't think I am okay with that. And so I had to get to a place of contentment and trust, with God in my own heart that this may not work out the way that I hoped. But she took some time. I don't remember how long it was, maybe a few days, maybe a week. I don't remember. But and she wrote me a letter and said, this doesn't change how I feel about you. And I think you're awesome. And I was like, okay, she's it. There is no one else for me. It is definitely her. I felt like that was my sign from God that, she was unfazed by my attraction to men, and that she felt secure enough in God and secure enough in my attraction to her, my love for her, that she was willing to take a chance. And so once she told me that, I was locked in. I started making wedding plans. Yes, went down that road, but no, I didn't go that far. But I was like one step at a time. But I think for me it was very much it was kind of in her hands, I think, at that point. And I think once she communicated that to me, I was convinced. So, yeah. So I think, for someone in my shoes, man, the input I would give is you really have to just be surrendered to whatever the outcome may be. You may be vulnerable and expose a part of your life that, is uncomfortable. And you have to be surrendered to the fact that, whoever you're sharing that with, whoever your interest may be in, may not want to be in a relationship. And that's okay. That's fair. It's okay for them to feel that way. And I think it all just kind of goes back to God being your greatest treasure, your greatest joy, who you find your comfort and your fulfillment in, because it may not work out the way that you hope. So hopefully it does. But at the end of the day, it may not. And I think being surrendered is absolutely important. So,
Before we close, you bring up a really good point that I think is worth repeating, and that is that, your ultimate joy, your ultimate comfort will be a relationship with God. It's always a mistake when you're anticipating that your significant other is going to be your ultimate joy, your ultimate comfort. Your spouse, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your fiance, or your husband or wife will never be able to play that role and truly fulfill and satisfy, the deepest parts of you.
okay.
And the expectation that someone would is incredibly unfair. And I've seen marriages blow up over that. And so I think as Christians, we recognize that the person that we're marrying is going to be a huge complement to our life, to our spiritual life, but can't be the one who's going to meet those needs. If your relationship with God it's not centered on that, and that's your ultimate fulfillment, you've got a bigger problem on your hands. So I'm glad you said that, because that's really important. And in our next podcast, what I think would be good, Davion, is for you and I to maybe unpack a little bit on giving people practicals and strategies on how to reveal this information, what works, what doesn't, when's the appropriate time to do so. And even help people who, for instance, maybe have been married for years and have never told their spouse of their same gender attractions, which is a whole new ballgame. We've got some practicals on that too, so we'll cover that in our next time together.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.